kinabukasan ng bayan.
Bawat bata may tanong, ba't ganito, ba't ganon? Hayang bukas ang isipan sa larangan ng panitikan. Tayo na sa Piliskwela, tuklasin natin ating wika. Buksan ang pag-iisip, pag-aralan lahat natin. Tayo na sa Piliskwela, tuklasin natin ating wika. Kinabukasan ng ating bayan, siguradong makakamtan.
Hello students, today we will be presenting part 1 of chapter 4, Social, Political, Economic and Cultural Issues in Philippine History. Learning Objectives. To analyze social, political, economic, and cultural issues in the Philippines using the lens of history. To recognize that the problems of today are consequences of decisions and events that happened in the past. To understand several enduring issues in Philippine society through history. To propose recommendations or solutions to present-day problems based on the understanding of the past and anticipation of the future through the study of history. Introduction. This chapter is dedicated to enduring issues in Philippine society which history could lend a hand in understanding and hopefully proposing solutions. These topics include the mandated discussion of the Philippine Constitution, policies on agrarian reform, and taxation. So, ang topic natin dito sa chapter 4 ay iikot sa tatlong topic. Una, yung pag-aaral natin ng saligang batas, yung pagbabago ng saligang batas ng Pilipinas. And then yung ikalawa, yung agrarian reform, mga batas sa lupa, lalong-lalo na yung agricultural land. And then yung taxation, yung buwis dito sa Pilipinas. It is hoped that these discussions will help us propose recommendations or solutions to present-day problems based on our understanding of root causes and how we anticipate future scenarios in the Philippine setting. So, kumbaga, aalamin natin kung paano nagsimula ba itong mga topics na ito. Paano ba yung evolution ng Philippine Constitution dito sa Pilipinas, ganon din yung batas sa lupa at yung mga batas sa buwis. Paano ba nagkaroon ng sistema ng pagbubuwis dito sa Pilipinas? At pag naintindihan kasi natin yan, kumbaga matutukoy natin kung bakit ganoon yung mga pangyayari sa ating pangkasalukuyan. Malalaman natin kung ano yung pinagmulan ng mga problema sa mga paksay na ito, sa paksay ng ating constitution, sa ating agrarian reform at saka taxation. So kung paano nagsimula at ano ang pwede nating bilang mga mag-aaral ng kasaysayan, ano ang magagawa natin bilang suggestion para sa ikauunlad, pagbabago sa mga bagay na ito para naman meron tayong masasabi nating ambag sa ating bansa bilang mga individual citizens ng ating bansa. So, una natin pag-aaralan ngayon is the evolution of the Philippine Constitution. And we will be presenting this in two parts. So, we will be studying for today the first half, which is 1897 Constitution of Biak na Bato, 1899 Malolos Constitution, and then 1935 the Commonwealth Constitution. Evolution of the Philippine Constitution. So, bago natin tunghayan yung mga pagbabago sa ating saligang batas, i-define muna natin kung ano ang Constitution. The Constitution is defined as a set of fundamental principles or established precedents according to which a state or other organization is governed. Sa Tagalog, ang saligang batas o Constitution ay isang pangkat ng mga prinsipyong saligan o fundamental o nailunsad at naitatag na mga pamarisan na pinagbabatayan o inaalinsunuran kung paano pinamamahalaan ang isang estado o iba pang organisasyon. So kung makikita natin ang kahulugan nito ng ating Constitution o saligang batas, it is presented in two parts. It is defined in two parts. Una, it is a set of fundamental principles. Isang pangkat o grupo ng mga tinatawag nating prinsipyong saligan, pamarisan o mga batas. So, maring ito ay batas sa karapatang pantao, batas sa teritoryong panglupa ng isang bansa, maring sa pamumuhay. So, aspeto ng pamumuhay ng isang mamamayan ng isang bansa. So, sa ating case, in our situation, karapatan natin, pamumuhay natin bilang mga Pilipino. And then, the second part, itong mga prinsipyong ito, itong mga batas na ito, itong mga pamarisan na ito, mga standard na ito yung sinusunod ng isang gobyerno kung papaano niya pamahalaan ang kanyang bansa. So, itong mga principles nito, ito yung sinusunod, ini-enforce ng gobyerno. So, in our case, ang gobyerno ng Pilipinas, kung paano niya i-govern ang ating bansa, ang bansang Pilipinas. The word itself means to be a part of a whole. From the word constitute, the coming together of distinct entities into one group with the same principles and ideals. These principles define the nature and extent of government. So, yung ating saligang batas, ito ang nagdi-define sa ating gobyerno. Siya yung nagga-guide sa ating gobyerno kung paano niya pamahalaan ang ating bansa. The Constitution of the Philippines, the supreme law of the Republic of the Philippines, has been in effect since 1987. There were only 3 other constitutions that have effectively governed the country. The 1935 Commonwealth Constitution, the 1973 Constitution, and the 1986 Freedom Constitution. However, there were earlier constitutions attempted by Filipinos in the struggle to break free from the colonial yoke. 1897 Constitution of Biak na Bato. The Constitution of Biak na Bato was the provisionary constitution of the Philippine Republic during the Philippine Revolution and was promulgated by the Philippine Revolutionary Government on November 1, 1897. So yung saligang batas ng Biak na Bato, ito yung tinatawag nating Provisionary Constitution. Kasi wala pa tayong saligang batas before that. So itong saligang batas na ito yung nilikha, tinatag ng tinatawag nating Philippine Revolutionary Government. Kumbaga, tungo sa ating kasarinlan, prior to our Philippine independence, ito yung itinatatag na constitution para sa ating bansa. The Constitution borrowed from Cuba was written by Isabelo Artacho and Felix Ferrer in Spanish and later on translated into Tagalog. So, hiniram natin tong saligang batas na ito sa Cuba, sa bansang Cuba, na unang isinulat sa Kastila and then i-translate, isinalin sa Tagalog. The organs of the government under the Constitution were the Supreme Council, which was vested with the power of the Republic, headed by the President and 4 department secretaries. The Interior, Foreign Affairs, Treasury, and War. So kumbaga sa ating modernong panahon, ito yung tinatawag nating executive branch. So pinamumunuan sila ng isang presidente at 4 na kalihim. So the Interior, Foreign Affairs, Treasury, and War. Number 2, the Consejo Supremo de Gracia y Justicia, Supreme Council of Grace and Justice, which was given the authority to make decisions and affirm or disprove the sentences rendered by other courts and to dictate rules for the administration of justice. So, itong Supreme Council of Grace and Justice, ito yung tinatawag nating judiciary branch. Ito yung, kumbaga, siya yung nagpapatupad ng batas. Number 3, the Asamblea de Representantes, Assembly of Representatives, which was to be convened after the revolution to create a new constitution and to elect a new council of government and representatives of the people. Itong mga representatives nito, ito yung kumbaga mga gumagawa ng batas. This is the legislative branch. The Constitution of Biak na Bato was never fully implemented since a truce, the Pact of Biak na Bato, was signed between the Spanish and the Philippine Revolutionary Army. Hindi talaga naipatupad itong Constitution na ito kasi nagkaroon ng kasunduan between the Spanish government and the Philippine Revolutionary Army. Nagkaroon ng pagkakasundo, nagkaroon ng tratado between these two parties. Kaya hindi talaga naipatupad, hindi talaga na-implement sa buong bansa itong Constitution of Biak na Bato. So this is the preamble of the Biak na Bato Constitution. The separation of the Philippines from the Spanish monarchy and their formation into an independent state with its own government called the Philippine Republic has been the end sought by the revolution in the existing war, begun on the 24th of August 1896. And therefore, in its name and by the power delegated by the Filipino people, interpreting faithfully their desires and ambitions, we, the representatives of the revolution, in a meeting at Biak na Bato, November 1, 1897, unanimously adopted the following articles for the Constitution of the state. 1899 Malolos Constitution. After the signing of the truce, the Filipino revolutionary leaders accepted the payment from Spain and went to exile in Hong Kong. Upon the defeat of the Spanish to the Americans in the Battle of Manila Bay on May 1, 1898, the United States Navy transported Aguinaldo back to the Philippines. So nung nilagdaan itong kasunduan na ito, yung mga Filipino revolutionary leaders, okay, sa pamumuno ni Emilio Aguinaldo, tumanggap sila ng bayad mula sa Espanya, and then sila ay nakulong. They went to exile sa Hong Kong. So nung magapi ang mga Kastila sa mga Amerikano sa Battle of Manila Bay, yung United States Navy ay ibinyahe pabalik ng Pilipinas si Aguinaldo. The newly reformed Philippine Revolutionary Forces reverted to the control of Aguinaldo, and the Philippine Declaration of Independence was issued on June 12, 1898, together with several decrees that formed the first Philippine Republic. So naibalik yung kapangyarihan, yung pamumuno kay Aguinaldo dun sa Philippine Revolutionary Forces. At yung Declaration of Independence natin, yung pagpapatupad ng ating kasarinlan ay ginawa ito noong June 12, 1898. At kasama dito yung mga tinatawag nating mga decrees o yung mga batas para mabuo yung unang republika ng Pilipinas. The Malolos Congress was elected, which selected a commission to draw up a draft constitution on September 17, 1898, which was composed of wealthy and educated men. So yung mga medyo nakapag-aral nating mga tao noon, sila yung mga kilalang mga tao, sila yung nag-commission nung tinatawag nating Malolos Constitution. The document they came up with, approved by the Congress on November 29, 1898, and promulgated by Aguinaldo on January 21, 1899, was titled The Political Constitution of 1899 and written in Spanish. The Constitution has 39 articles divided into 14 titles, with 8 articles of transitory provisions and the final additional article. So medyo mas malawak ito kung ikukumpara mo sa Biak na Bato Constitution. So kung ikukumpara naman natin ito sa ating saligang batas sa kasulukuyan, which is the 1987 Constitution, ang 1987 Constitution meron siyang 18 articles. So baka sabihin mo, sir, mas malawak ang sakop nitong Malolos Constitution. Hindi, kasi yung ating Constitution sa pangkasalukuyan, actually mas malawak ito. Bakit? Halimbawa na lang yung Bill of Rights natin. It has 22 sections. Paborito ko dyan yung section 20. Ano? No person will be imprisoned because of debt. Okay? Hindi ka makukulong sa utang. Yun ang section 20 ng ating Bill of Rights. Doon pa lang, napaka komplikado na, napakalawak na. So, yun yung comparison ng Malolos Constitution to our Constitution today. The document was patterned after the Spanish Constitution of 1812 with influences from the charters of Belgium, Mexico, Brazil, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and Guatemala, and the French Constitution of 1793. So, isinunod naman ito sa Spanish Constitution of 1812. Kung yung biyak na bato, ang pinagmumulan niya yung Constitution of Cuba, ito naman, Spanish Constitution of 1812. So, kumuha daw siya ng mga tinatawag nating mga articles, mga charters mula sa Belgium, Mexico, Brazil, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Guatemala, and the French Constitution of 1793. So, ang ibig sabihin nun, Spanish Constitution, tapos kumuha siya ng ilang mga batas mula sa saligang batas ng Belgium, etc., etc. According to Felipe Calderon, main author of the Constitution, these countries were studied because they shared similar social, political, ethnological, and governance conditions with the Philippines. So, meron daw kahawig sa Pilipinas itong mga bansang ito in terms of their social, political, ethnological, and governance conditions. Prior constitutional projects in the Philippines also influenced the Malolos Constitution, namely the Cartilla and the Sangguniang Hukuman, the Charter of Laws and Morals of the Katipunan written by Emilio Jacinto in 1896. So, idinagdag din nila dito yung mga batas ng Katipunan. The Biak na Bato Constitution of 1897 planned by Isabelo Artacho. So, mga ilang batas din mula sa Biak na Bato Constitution. Mabinis Constitutional Program of the Philippine Republic of 1898. The Provincial Constitution of Mariano Ponce in 1898 that followed the Spanish Constitutions, and the Autonomy Projects of Paterno in 1898. So, dito sa Malolos Constitution, marami talagang pinanggalingan ng kanyang mga batas, ng kanyang mga articles. So, talagang pinagtagpi-tagpi itong mga tinatawag nating mga batas mula sa mga iba't ibang saligang batas. Ngayon, basahin natin yung preamble of the Political Constitution of 1899. We, the representatives of the Filipino, lawfully convene in order to establish justice, provide for common defense, promote the general welfare, and ensure the benefits of liberty, imploring the aid of the sovereign legislator of the universe for the attainment of these ends, have voted, deserved, and sanctioned the following political constitution. As a direct challenge to colonial authorities of the Spanish Empire, the sovereignty was retroverted to the people, a legal principle underlying the Philippine Revolution. So, ang pinakadahilan kung bakit nagkaroon ng himagsikan ay para maibalik ang soberanya sa mga Pilipino, sa mga tao. Maibalik ang pagmamay-ari ng Pilipinas sa mga Pilipino. The people delegated governmental functions to civil servants while they retained actual sovereignty. So yung mga tao, nagtalaga sila ng mga mamamahala while they retained actual sovereignty. Hindi ko mo mamamahala, maalis na sa kanila yung karapatang pang bilang mamamayan ng Pilipinas. So, ang nagmamay-ari sa Pilipinas ay mga Pilipino. The 27 articles of Title IV detail the natural rights and popular sovereignty of Filipinos, the enumeration of which does not imply the prohibition of any other rights not expressly stated. Ang ibig sabihin, dun sa Title 4, yung 27 na article na yon, dinidetalya, inilalarawan doon yung karapatan ng mga Pilipino sa bansang Pilipinas. At yung mga nakasulat doon, hindi naman ibig sabihin na kung ano yung nakasulat doon, yun lang yung karapatan nila. Meron din silang mga rights not expressly stated. Hindi tuwirang sinabi doon. Pero yun ang pakahulugan. Title 3, Article 5 also declares that the state recognizes the freedom and equality of all beliefs, as well as the separation of church and state. So, nandoon din yung separation of church and state. At saka yung karapatan, kumbaga karapatan sa lahat ng paniniwala. Kumbaga freedom of religion, freedom of belief. These are direct reactions to features of the Spanish government in the Philippines where the friars were dominant agents of the state. Kasi dun sa nakalipas na mga pamamahala, sapilitan pinipilit ang relihiyon sa tao. Ibig sabihin, kumbaga almost wala kang karapatan na mamili kung ano yung gusto mong paniwalaan. Pero dito, nagkaroon ng tinatawag na freedom and equality of all beliefs. Tapos nagkaroon din ng separation of church and state. Na hindi pwedeng makialam ang simbahan sa mga affairs ng Estado. Ganon din ang Estado, hindi siya pwedeng makialam sa affairs ng simbahan. The form of government according to Title 2, Article 4, is to be popular. Ibig sabihin, sa tao. Representative, alternative, and responsible, and shall exercise 3 distinct powers. So, nandun yung mga katangian ng gobyerno. Popular, ibig sabihin, makatao. Representative, ibig sabihin, sa bawat sektor ng mga mamamayan, meron siyang, meron siyang pinaglalaanan. Alternative, ibig sabihin, hindi para sa isang sektor lamang, kung hindi para sa lahat ng sektor. And responsible, ibig sabihin, siya yung may gabay, siya yung may tangan sa mga tao, and shall exercise 3 distinct powers: legislative, executive, and judicial. At yan na rin ang meron tayo ngayon sa ating kasalukuyang saligang batas. The legislative power was vested in a unicameral body called the Assembly of Representatives, members of which are elected for terms of 4 years. So every 4 years silang yung kanilang tenure of office, itong mga tinatawag na Assembly of Representatives o sa modernong pananalita, mga congressmen. Secretaries of the government were given seats in the assembly which meet annually for a period of at least 3 months. Bills could be introduced either by the president or by a member of the assembly. Okay, so yung inilulunsad na batas, mga batas na sinusulat, either ipinapakilala ng presidente o yung miyembro nitong tinatawag na Assembly of Representatives. Some powers not legislative in nature were also given to the body, such as the right of impeaching the president, cabinet members, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and the Solicitor General. So, itong Assembly of Representative, meron din silang ganitong klase ng kapangyarihan. Pwede nilang ma-impeach ang presidente, alinmang cabinet members, yung Chief Justice o yung punong hukom ng Korte Suprema, at yung Solicitor General. A permanent commission of 7 elected by the Assembly and granted specific powers by the Constitution was to sit during the intervals between sessions of the Assembly. Executive power was vested in the President and elected by a constituent assembly of the Assembly of Representatives and Special Representatives. The President will serve a term of 4 years without re-election. So, pag naging presidente siya, hindi na siya pwedeng umulit. Tapos, itong presidente, according to the Malolos Constitution, ay iboboto ng tinatawag nating Constituent Assembly, nung Assembly of Representatives. Kasi, hindi pa katulad ng panahon natin ngayon na meron na tayong kakayahan na magkaroon ng national election eh. Pero dito hindi pa ganun ka sophisticated yung sistema ng election sa Pilipinas. So it is election by Constituent Assembly of the Assembly of Representatives. There was no vice president, and in case of a vacancy, a president was to be selected by the Constituent Assembly. So, ano man mangyari dun sa nakatayong presidente, nakaupong presidente, pag nagkaroon ng vacancy, magboboto ulit mamimili ulit ng presidente. The 1899 Malolos Constitution was never enforced due to the ongoing war. The Philippines was effectively a territory of the United States upon the signing of the Treaty of Paris between Spain and the United States, transferring sovereignty of the Philippines on December 10, 1898. So, nung nagkaroon ng signing of the Treaty of Paris, so, naging teritoryo na tayo, naging Commonwealth na tayo ng Estados Unidos. So, ang hangad din naman ng Estados Unidos noon, maibalik sa atin yung ating sovereignty. And that happened in December 10, 1898. 1935, the Commonwealth Constitution. It is worth mentioning that after the Treaty of Paris, the Philippines was subject to the power of the United States of America, effectively the new colonizers of the country. From 1898 to 1901, the Philippines would be placed under a military government until a civil government would be put into place. Two acts of the United States Congress were passed that may be considered to have qualities of constitutionality. Okay, so explain ko muna yung mga yun, ano? So, nung 1898 to 1901, nailagay sa military government ang ating bansa. Dahil wala pang tinatawag natin na civil government noon eh. Dahil nga nagkaroon ng pagbabago. Naging territory na tayo ngayon ng Estados Unidos. So yung mga Kastila kasi hindi na sila ang namumuno sa ating bansa, Estados Unidos. So from 1898 to 1901, nailagay tayo sa military government. Okay? Martial rule. I'm not saying martial law. I'm saying martial rule. Military government. So two acts of the United States Congress were passed that may be considered to have qualities of constitutionality. First was the Philippine Organic Act of 1902, the first organic law of the Philippine Islands that provided for the creation of a popularly elected Philippine Assembly. So, yan yung mga pinasa sa Kongreso ng Estados Unidos. Una, yung Philippine Organic Act of 1902. Ibig sabihin na yung Philippine Assembly o yung mga representantes, sila ay iboboto. Hindi sila itatalaga lamang o pipiliin. Kung hindi sila iboboto ng mga tao, popularly elected. The act specified that legislative power would be vested in a bicameral legislature composed of the Philippine Commission as the upper house and the Philippine Assembly as the lower house. So, kumbaga, itong Philippine Commission, ito yung counterpart ng Senate sa panahon natin ngayon. Tapos itong Philippine Assembly, this is the lower house or the House of Representatives, mga congressman, congresswoman. Key provisions of the act included a Bill of Rights for Filipinos and the appointment of 2 non-voting Filipino resident commissioners of the Philippines as representative to the United States House of Representatives. So, dito sa Philippine Organic Act na to, nagkaroon ng Bill of Rights sa karapatan ng mga Pilipino. Tapos, mag-a-appoint sila ng 2 non-voting Filipino resident commissioners of the Philippines. Tapos, nagre-represent ito sa Estados Unidos, dun sa House of Representatives sa Estados Unidos. The second act that functioned as a constitution was the Philippine Autonomy Act of 1916, commonly referred to as Jones Law, which modified the structure of the Philippine government through the removal of the Philippine Commission. So, pinalitan yung pangalan, naging Senate na ito that served as the upper house and its members elected by the Filipino voters, the first truly elected national legislature. Kasi di ba yung mga nakalipas, binoboto lang elected lang ng Constituent Assembly eh. Pero ito, mga Pilipino na talaga ang bumoboto, national legislature. It was also this act that explicitly declared the purpose of the United States to end their sovereignty over the Philippines and recognize Philippine independence as soon as a stable government can be established. So, this is explicitly declared. Talagang sinabi ng Estados Unidos ito na ibabalik sa Pilipinas yung soberanya at magkakaroon ng Philippine independence as soon as a stable government can be established. Pag naitatag na yung gobyerno, okay, magkakaroon na ng sariling sovereignty ang Pilipinas. In 1932, with the efforts of the Filipino Independence Mission, led by Sergio Osmeña and Manuel Rojas, the United States Congress passed the Hair House Cutting Act with the promise of granting Filipinos independence. The bill was opposed by then Senate President Manuel L. Quezon and consequently rejected by the Philippine Senate. By 1934, another law, the Tithing's Mcduffie Act, also known as the Philippine Independence Act, was passed by the United States Congress that provided authority and defined mechanism for the establishment of a formal constitution by a constitutional convention. So ito yung tinatawag nilang Con. Okay? The members of the convention were elected and held their first meeting on July 13, 1934, with Claro M. Recto unanimously elected as president. The Constitution was crafted to meet the approval of the United States government and to ensure that the United States would live up to its promise to grant independence to the Philippines. Primary source, preamble of the 1935 Commonwealth. Basahin natin. The Filipino people, imploring the aid of divine providence, in order to establish a government that shall embody their ideals, conserve and develop the patrimony of the nation, promote the general welfare, and secure to themselves and their posterity the blessings of independence under a regime of justice, liberty, and democracy, do ordain and promulgate this Constitution. The Constitution created the Commonwealth of the Philippines, an administrative body that governed the Philippines from 1935 to 1946. It is a transitional administration to prepare the country toward its full achievement of independence. It originally provided for a unicameral National Assembly, with the President and Vice President elected to a 6-year term without a re-election. So, una nilang napag-usapan kasi, napagkasunduan dito sa Commonwealth Constitution na yung tinatawag na National Assembly, it is unicameral. Ibig sabihin, walang senator, walang congressman, isa lang, unicameral, isa lang na tinatawag natin na National Assembly. Kumbaga, congressman lang, representatives lang, with the President and Vice President elected to a 6-year term without a re-election. So, mamumuno sila ng 6 na taon, tapos wala ng re-election. It was amended in 1940 to have a bicameral Congress composed of a Senate and a House of Representatives. So, noong 1940, naging bicameral na ito. Nagkaroon ng upper house at saka lower house, as well as the creation of an independent electoral commission. So, kumbaga, nagkaroon ng commission on election and limited the term of office of the President and Vice President to 4 years naging 4 na lang na taon, pero pwede silang ma-re-elect. Pwedeng maiboto ulit. Rights to suffrage o yung karapatang bumoto were originally afforded to male citizens of the Philippines who are 21 years of age or over and are able to read and write. This was later on extended to women within 2 years after the adoption of the Constitution. So, nagkaroon ng karapatan na bumoto yung mga kalalakihan. And then, within 2 years, binigyan na rin ng karapatan na bumoto ang mga kababaihan. So, 21 years of age and over. While the dominant influence in the Constitution was American, it also bears traces of the Malolos Constitution, the German, Spanish, and Mexican constitutions, constitutions of several South American countries, and the unwritten English Constitution. So nagkaroon na naman ng iba't ibang adoption of mga charters o yung mga tinatawag nating mga batas mula sa iba't ibang constitution. So merong galing ng Malolos Constitution, tapos meron ding from the German, Spanish, Mexican Constitution. Pero the dominant influence, of course, American, ano? Sila yung namuno sa atin eh. The draft of the Constitution was approved by the Constitutional Convention on February 8, 1935 and ratified by then U.S. President Franklin B. Roosevelt on March 25, 1935. Elections were held in September 1935, and Manuel L. Quezon was elected President of the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth was briefly interrupted by the events of the World War II, with the Japanese occupying the Philippines. Afterward, upon liberation, the Philippines was declared an independent republic on July 4, 1946. And that wraps up our study of the evolution of the Philippine Constitution. So, next week, ang pag-aaralan natin ay yung second half of the evolution of the Philippine Constitution. 1973 Constitution, tapos yung 1986 Freedom Constitution, and then 1987 Constitution, tapos yung mga amendments or yung attempts to change the 1987 Constitution. So yan ang pag-aaralan natin next in our next lesson. I hope you learned a lot in our presentation for today. Thank you for joining me. May you have a good day and God bless.